Offline ticket entry, we're going to cover primarily, we're going to do a brief overview. We're going to go over what offline ticket entry is, where it can be most useful. We're going to go over the management console. So primarily we are going to focus on areas that are related to offline ticket entry specifically in the management console. It does cover other areas in that software, but we're not going to touch things like the mail or data aggregation. And we're going to get into some best practice for offline ticket entry. Connecting stations of synced, unregistering stations, weekly tests. Now, first, what is offline ticket entry? It is a localized installation of Counterpoint. It's generally installed on registers in particular, and it contains a local copy of both the database and the program files. It allows operation without a connection to the server. It also allows operation without a connection to the internet as a whole, although there are there is specifics in regards to credit cards. We'd need store and forward or stand-in authorization activated in order to use credit cards and offline without internet. It's useful in off-site events like trade shows, during a network interruption, unstable network environments. So if your internet regularly goes down or doesn't have very high bandwidth, you can operate primarily in offline. And it's useful during server maintenance, depending on the server maintenance. There are some maintenance activities like service pack upgrades where it's best not to operate in offline during that time. Now, components, we have the database, contains a copy of all Counterpoint configuration data that's relevant to ticket entry. These are things like SKUs, prices, customers. It regularly connects and syncs with the server database when the connection is up. So during normal live Counterpoint operation, that offline database will be regularly connecting and updating itself to make sure that when offline is engaged, everything necessary is there. And it'll regularly download the configuration information and upload sales information for sales that are rung in offline. The program files side of it contains everything necessary to run Counterpoint with a few features missing. It won't do in-depth sales reporting, but it will allow you to ring sales successfully, perform zooms. It contains all of your necessary forms and a copy of all reports that would be available in offline, but it does not automatically sync custom files like forms and reports. Those need to be manually synchronized. The reporting functions are limited, and there are a number of other limitations. I've included a link here to the help file that lists all of the limitations of offline to get more into that. Now, to make sure that everything is synced properly on the local register, most of the time we are going to utilize the CP Services status icon. You can see it in the system tray of a register with offline installed. It'll show you the connection status. Disconnected does not necessarily mean that it's unable to reach the server, although in this screenshot, it is unable to reach the server. Disconnected can just mean that it's not actively transporting information to or from the server at the moment. It shows you what work group and workstation it is. So that's 1 here would be the work group, 100 would be the station. It'll tell you the last time it connected to the server, the local service URL, and the remote service URL. And it'll tell you whether these services are responding. Now, the service in question here is the Radiant Counterpoint service. And if it's stopped on the local register, it will not communicate with the server and transport data up and down. If it's stopped on the server, the same issue will occur for all offline stations, and there are a number of other issues that can occur there as well. You would most likely notice if your Counterpoint server, or if your Counterpoint service were to be stopped on the server. In the data status area, we can see whether offline considers itself to be synced. You can see the last time it uploaded sales to the server, the last time it downloaded configuration information from the server, and the number of packages queued and the number of tickets awaiting extraction. In the bottom, in the controls area, we can see extract now. Now this will extract any of these tickets awaiting extraction in the bottom of this window. Refresh will simply refresh the data that's displayed here. Copy will copy the data displayed here to a notepad. Show and hide will collapse or expand these menus, and close will close out of it. But generally speaking, extract now won't need to be pressed. Sometimes sales will not bring themselves up automatically, and that's where that extract now button becomes helpful. It'll allow you to queue the station to send all of its information to the server. Now, in order to see the individual sales that are in offline, we would open up offline Counterpoint and we'd go to the ticket edit list, generally found under point of sale tickets. This will show you a list of all of the sales that are on the offline station. And once the sale has synced successfully with the server, it will remove that entry from the edit list. So it is a good reference sheet if you feel that you might be missing tickets in live Counterpoint. You can take a look in the edit list and you can compare that edit list to the edit list and ticket history on the server to see if those ticket numbers are present there. Now, let's get into the management console a little bit. Management console is a program with a fairly wide amount of functionality. A lot of it is focused around offline. It can be launched in the start menu on the application server. It's going to be under the NCR Counterpoint folder. The entry in Object Explorer panel provides package count and communication status. The database entry in the Object Explorer, and I'll show you these on following slides, but the database entry shows basic workstation and database information. Now, here we see the server entry in the Object Explorer. It shows some basic information about Counterpoint's configuration, the machine name, the software version, the name of the system, and the system ID. But in regards to offline, this right here is going to be a very helpful way to get a quick, just bird's eye view of how your sales are syncing. This particular screenshot is from our test system, so it doesn't have active offline environment. You don't see any packages going up and down, but you can see it would normally show you a graph of the number of packages synced in total. In blue and purple, you would see the successful packages. Yellow, you would see the errored packages, anything that's encountered an error in the sync process. And red, you would see packages that have some other aspect to them. It also identifies a port that the server is running on. Generally speaking, that won't be necessary, but sometimes it's useful from a support perspective. If you look on the, I'm going to go back here to the workstation, that is this port right here. If the remote service on the register is pointing to the wrong port on the system URL field, it will not correctly sync. Under the second tab, communications status, this will show a list of all offline workstations. It will show current sync status using a colored icon on the left, and that icon is red. It has been at least 15 minutes since that register is communicated with the server. If that icon is yellow, it means it's been between 10 and 15 minutes. And if it's green, it means it's been under 15 minutes. So you can use this filter here to filter by the package state or the session status. Generally speaking, I keep it unfiltered. It makes it easier to view all of the data, but you can definitely filter it just to bird package to make sure that you're getting a list of the stations that are encountering issues. Now, under the database tab, or under the database object rather, in Object Explorer, this would be the second nested icon down. It will show you, again, basic company information. It'll give you the name of the company, according to Counterpoint, the machine name of the SQL server, the name of the database in question, database version, and database state. Now, most of this isn't necessarily directly relevant to offline, so we're not going to spend too much time on it. Where the most useful information regarding troubleshooting offline is under the store and workstation tabs. Now, under store, we can extract data. This will push all of recently changed database configuration information from the server to the local machine. This will do it for all registers at the store, and it will only do this for information recently changed since the data was last extracted to the station. It's good for if you make a change to an item and you want that change to be reflected immediately, rather than waiting for the 15 minutes for it to naturally move downward. The full extract is similar to a regular extract, but it will transfer all configuration information. So this includes configurations that have not changed recently. It can be helpful if you find that something in Counterpoint, in offline Counterpoint in particular, is out of date. You can use a full extract to push down the recent configuration information. And rebuild. Rebuild will overwrite all data in the local system. It will lose all of your sales that are saved to the local system, so it's important to use this button with caution. And it'll send a completely new database structure down to the system. It's useful for troubleshooting deep system issues. As long as that database is connected to the application server and the database itself is in a healthy state, it will solve any issues with the data within that database. I would caution against generally using this in the stores section here, as this will do the entire store at once. We can do all these features from the workstation tab instead, and we can run them for individual registers, so we don't have to worry about losing as much sales data if some of the registers still have data on them. The checksums tab, which I'm going to go back right up here, you can click here to get to the checksums tab. And from the checksums tab, you can see a list of all registers in that work group that have recently used offline. It'll show you the number of documents on the station and in live. And if those numbers do not match, this line will appear in red. So you'll be able to see that this is one that has not synced properly, and it might need some attention from either you or from support. You can see the number of sale lines and the total number of sales as well. And similar to the total number of documents, a mismatch in any of these fields will turn this line red and draw attention to something that may need further attention. And to address any issues that you encounter, if you see that there is a mismatch here, we can use that extract now in the CP services status icon on the local register. And that will queue any of those packages that have not sent to send up to the station. It's one of our first troubleshooting steps when we see a mismatch, because that should sync all missing sales data up with the server. Now, we can expand into the individual workstations by clicking on one of the store entries to expand. And you'll see a list of workstations in the store. Now, each of these is a station entry in Counterpoint. If you see a black screen, it means it is not registered as an offline station. If you see a blue screen without a red arrow, it means it is registered as an offline station and is syncing, has synced within the last 15 minutes. If you see a red arrow, that indicates that it's registered as an offline station, but it has been more than 15 minutes since it is last synced with the server. This can indicate that the network is down, the register is turned off, or anything else that is getting in between communication from offline on the register to the application server. And you have similar options under the workstation. This is where we can queue an extract, a full extract, or a rebuild for individual registers. Most of the time, this is where I would suggest performing any of those actions. Particularly rebuilds, those are best used with caution and generally on one register at a time, as rebuilding many registers at once can cause you to encounter some performance issues in live. You can see the last contact date of each station, the registration date, so how long it's been active as an offline unit. And you can see what store and station is registered to, as well as the machine name. Now, the new buttons here are Request File Sync and Unregister. These aren't available under the Store tab. Now, a file sync will create a request for the server to send down your entire top-level directory from the server to the workstation. This is useful when you have a new custom form that wouldn't be in the database. That is a file on your application server. So say a new receipt format or invoice. We would request a file sync to cue the system to send that custom file down to the local machine. It will not do it automatically through its regular synchronization. Unregister is more or less what it sounds like. It removes the offline workstation entry for this unit, although we do generally recommend, rather than unregistering it in the management console, that we instead unregister it on the local workstation. Unregistering it on the management console can leave that local workstation more difficult to unregister on its end and cause some data issues. And it keeps us from taking the time to enter that offline workstation and verify that all sales have been synced to the server. Once a station's unregistered, we can't really get those sales back onto the server. For unregistering, we also want to be cautious when unregistering from the local machine or from management console, as unregistering it will remove the device records for the workstation from live as well as offline. It will remove the entire workstation entry in Counterpoint, and that station will need to be recreated. So if you have somebody operating in live Counterpoint and you're doing some maintenance on the offline environment, I would recommend against unregistering offline until they are no longer using live Counterpoint on that register. Otherwise, they can see issues with their card reader or with their cash drawer, receipt printer, point of sale devices in general. And now, I mentioned confirming all sales data has synchronized with the server prior to running a rebuild command. The way we would do that is, as I explained earlier, just with the ticket edit list, we'd run that ticket edit list on the local offline register, take note of the ticket numbers that are present on that register, and we would take a look at the ticket edit list and ticket history reports in live Counterpoint and make sure that we can find all of those ticket numbers in live Counterpoint. This confirms that there's no missing information. We're not seeing any gaps in our sales. As far as best practices, things that I would recommend for maintaining your database over time, I would regularly confirm the sync status in Management Console. It's not necessary to connect to every register to see the CP services status there. I would suggest just taking a look at either the checksums tab for a store or looking at the graph I showed you in the company tab to make sure that everything is moving properly. That checksums tab is useful after large offline events in particular. So if you see an entire store into offline due to an internet outage or entire region, I would suggest checking that checksums tab afterwards. It will tell you whether or not all of your sales have synced. If your offline stations aren't communicating at all with the server, for instance, if they still don't have internet, naturally that checksums tab won't be able to keep you up to date on whether or not the sales are synced. But as long as all registers have a connection to the server, that checksums tab should keep you informed about the number of offline tickets found on the station and on the register. Sorry, excuse me, on the register and on the server. I'd always recommend registering stations from the local machine when they're taken out of service. It helps keep your event viewer on the server nice and clean. It prevents the server from spending resources on trying to synchronize with stations that are no longer present. And it makes it easier when you are trying to register stations in the future, because the station will be available for the new register to be registered to. I suggest checking offline ticket edit list prior to decommissioning any registers. Just like with a rebuild, that edit list tell you if any sales information is perhaps missing. And before we decommission and recycle any out-of-date machines or any machines that have been experiencing issues, we want to check that edit list to make sure that all of our data is there. And the most important on this list is to perform a test ticket in offline Counterpoint every week. That makes sure that offline will be working for you when your internet goes down. So we do often see that people end up with an offline issue in their local register that might not go addressed for 6 months because they don't need offline for those 6 months. They don't have their internet down, everything is working properly. But once their internet goes down, it is a lot more difficult to troubleshoot whatever offline issue that is. If the station needs a rebuild, we can't send it from the server without an internet connection. If the station needs a technician to connect to it, we can't do that without an internet connection. So I'd highly recommend performing a test ticket in offline Counterpoint every week for every register to confirm that everything's working properly. Now, that concludes what I have prepared. For more detailed information on offline ticket overviews of some of these features, many other features, we can take a look at these 2 presentations listed here. Ryan will be sending you the slide deck after this webinar that'll contain all of these lists. I also included the Counterpoint Store and Forward webinar. Now, the Store and Forward webinar is going to be crucial for operating with credits without an internet connection. It's one of the most common things that we hear asked for in regards to offline is how can I get credit cards running without internet? And Store and Forward is the way to do that. It solves one of the largest limitations offline used to have. All right. Are there any questions?
Great, thanks, Alex. And like he mentioned, I'll send the slide presentation so you guys will have these links. We do have a question from Rebecca. She's wondering if registers are hanging around after out of service in the management console, can we use the unregister button?
Yes. So if you no longer have the ability to unregister a register from the local machine, that's when I would suggest using that unregister button on the management console. It shouldn't cause issues in live. The biggest risk really is just missing sales data. But if the machine's no longer available, that's either you haven't lost any sales data or you already have. And you can feel free to use that unregister button.
Great, thanks. Kelly asks, for optimal use, we need offline ticket and Store and Forward. Is that correct?
For offline use without credit cards, you can just use offline ticket. But if you do need to use credit cards in offline, yes, you would want Store and Forward.
Okay. And I don't know, Alex, this might not be your department, and I don't have the answer, so we may have to go to the account representative, but do you know the cost associated with Store and Forward or offline ticket?
It is a little bit outside of my department.
Yeah.
I have some general ideas, but I definitely don't want to be wrong.
Sure thing. Kelly, I'll get Ariel has an answer. Or she has a comment. Let me check here.
And now one thing that I didn't address in the PowerPoint that I do want to address now is many people that are in the Aero environment may not immediately have access to this management console. If that's the case, we can add access to that management console in one of your menu codes. It doesn't come installed on the terminal servers by default, but that is something that we can provide. So just let us know on support if you are missing access to the management console and you're in our Aero environment, and we can help add that.
Great. I'm going to try and allow Ariel to talk here. One moment.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. So just as far as costs go, for offline ticket entry, if you don't already have the option on your registration file, there's a per user fee associated with that. And that can be based on your license count. So as you know, if you have, a lot of licenses, you get volume discounts and things like that. So for Kelly specifically, I'll have your account manager, Holly, reach out to you with pricing. And then store and forward, you can actually set up yourself, or we can guide you through that implementation. As Alex mentioned, he's included that webinar. It's got a lot of great information. There's a link to the help online that will walk you through all the parameters you have to set up and how to update your file to turn on store and forward. And that's a per station setting.
Great. Thanks, Ariel.
You're welcome.
We appreciate everyone attending, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ryan. Have a great day.
Have a good day.